we are really fortunate today to have a group from one of my favorite places in Idaho, Sandpoint, up north. And this team of advocates are going to talk about what they've been able to accomplish as different advocacy groups. So I'm going to introduce each person with just a very short introduction because they are all so involved and accomplished in their own way. I'll just give a little bit of background here. Ross Langini is the president of the Sandpoint Nordic Club. Jason Welker is the Pend Oreille Pedalers, I believe, executive director or director. Okay. Julie Myers, president of Pend Oreille Pedalers, and she's the things that Julie's done for Sandpoint are pretty amazing as an advocate. And then Katie is the executive director of the Kaniksu Land Trust. So we have 4 organizations that have worked together to accomplish amazing things. And with that, I'm turning it over to the group. Who's going to start?
Katie, you might.
Julie, yeah, Julie's going to start by a little bit more of a brief introduction of herself and her organization.
All right. Hi, everybody. I'm really glad to be here. I am just super honored to be in the presence of all of these really cool people that I get to work with the North Idaho Trail Collaborative, and also Jason as the president of, or the executive director of Pend Oreille Pedalers. I kind of fell into this by, I've been in Sandpoint, Idaho for 49 years and counting. So I love this town and I love this area and I love the outdoors, access and trails and mountain biking. So that said, I'm committed to forwarding the idea of access and community awareness and use of our open spaces around our area. And let's see. As an Equinox, our Equinox Foundation is a private family foundation that I have had the privilege to be able to give money to all sorts of interesting and great outdoor trails and open space and conservation organizations. And NITSE is a unique in its way of being a collaboration of the most, what I think are the most interesting and awesome or outdoor trail, year-round trail organizations. So they have to, NITSE members have to take off their hats for their own organization and together, work together to promote this agenda of non-motorized trail in our community and bring, so our work is only beginning, but it's pretty amazing what we've accomplished so far. And I'll stop there.
All right. Yeah, I'm Ross Langini. Been here in Idaho since 2012. Born and raised in most of my career in the upper Midwest, Wisconsin, Minnesota, and upper Peninsula, Michigan. When my wife and I moved out here, we were kind of surprised that being in a ski town, that there wasn't much Nordic going on at the time. And after coming out of the Midwest and seeing high schools with 200 kids on their Nordic ski teams and things, and then not even to have a youth program here at the time, it was like, oh, let's make a difference in the community. So this is a bit of my second career. My primary career has been in medical device development, and now I'm at a time in my life when I can devote more and more of my time to outdoor recreation, and particular penchant on youth outdoor recreation. Now, Jason.
Yeah, I'll go next. My name is Jason Welker. As has been said, I'm the executive director of Pend Oreille Pedalers, which is Sandpoint's cycling and trails organization. We're kind of a mountain bike club, but we also do a lot of trail building as well. I've had kind of a foot in Sandpoint since 2004, when my wife, who is from the area, and I bought our first little cabin here. For most of that time since then, my wife and I were international school teachers. I'm an economics teacher in my previous career. Like to say, I retired early to come back to the place I really wanted to be after being overseas in Asia and Europe for 13 years. About 4 years ago, I started volunteering with Pend Oreille Pedalers just as a trail crew member and joining group rides. Then I joined the board 2 years ago, and about a year ago this month, actually, the opportunity came up to step up and be the actual executive director. So it's been a really exciting year since I joined as the first ever staff person for the club. We just had so much momentum last year with some big grants that we received that helped us build several miles of new trail around Sandpoint. Also, NITSE formed last year, and I became the Pend Oreille Pedaler representative on the North Idaho Trails Collaborative. That's how I got the opportunity to start working with these colleagues of mine. So I'm really excited to be here as well. We'll pass it to Katie.
Hi, I'm Katie Cox. I'm the executive director here at Kaniksu Land Trust, also a member of the North Idaho Trails Collaborative. I'm born and raised in Idaho, native Idahoan, born and raised in Moscow, and lived in a little town called Elk City, Idaho, which hopefully you have gotten to visit, although it is at the end of a dead-end road, so maybe not, put it on your list. I have an interesting path to this position here at Kaniksu Land Trust. I began my career in architecture, and most of the architecture that I worked on, I really wanted to focus on building community and structures that really were about bringing people together. Everything from public art to actual, little coffee shops or medical centers, anything that could help a community bring people together and support the community. And that led me, along with my intense love of trails and trail running and biking and Nordic skiing, led me to volunteer for trail organizations, and brought me to the work of Kaniksu Land Trust, helping them with the Pine Street Woods Capital campaign, which you'll hear a little bit more about later. But what I realized in doing this work is that my lifetime focus on building community can happen also in the beautiful outdoors. And it can happen through bringing people together on trails and bringing people together that have a common mission about protecting the outdoors and using these amazing spaces. So my love of and desire to build community is now, I'm doing that work here at Kaniksu Land Trust.
Awesome. I'll take it. We're going to give you a little bit of history of trails and trail development here in North Idaho. And a lot of this, frankly, we're standing on the shoulders of people in front of us. But first, it culminated in this thing called trail mix. And I'll get to that in a second. But just before we get there, back in 1994, the North Idaho Pathways came about, and they said we needed more commuter trails, and they endeavored to build connected paved trails for bicycling and walking to the surrounding communities. And then in 2004, POP, where Jason and Julie are part of, POP was formed as a bicycling organization. And then in 2008, the county started saying, well, we need to have an advisory group on trails, as they were doing their comprehensive plans. And that was formed and then disbanded not too long after that. In 2011, the Sandpoint Nordic Club was formed by just a couple of families that thought we should have an organization to promote Nordic skiing in North Idaho. And then finally, I think the culmination that really said something to, or really started to bring this forward, was that Trail Mix was formed in about 2015. And what Trail Mix was this opportunity at a county-wide level to bring all of these groups that you see and more that are on the slide together. So we looked at motorized users and non-motorized users. We looked at people that were snowmobiling, ATVs, off-road motorcycles, to horses, and then of course, bikers and hikers and all the communities and the national government. So, what we are going to talk a little bit about is what came out of Trail Mix. What was the thing that they did? So We were working, and Jason, did you have a comment right now that you want to talk about North Idaho trails? I just want to turn it over to you if you had more there.
Nope, I'm just sharing some links that people can follow to
Okay,
some of the product, some of the output from Trail Mix and the other efforts. That
perfect. So what did Trail Mix do? They started in 2014, and what was their mission? And if we go to the next slide, Katie, what Trail Mix worked on was with the Trust for Public Lands was a Bonner County Trails Plan. And this is about when they were starting to work on this plan is when I got involved with Trail Mix. And again, we brought all these different people together. We looked at things like connectivity. We looked at transportation and recreation. We did a bunch of survey work. I remember being at the county fair with maps up on the board and taking input from people that were fair goers. We also had Headwaters Economics do a trail survey for us. And at the end of the day, we came up with this thing called the Bonner County Trails Plan. And that plan is a very trail focused, plan that shows maps of all the trails we'd love to have. And these trails span, like I said, everything from trails that would help us connect. A lot of them are trails, frankly, that would help us connect within our communities. And then, but also they encompass the trails that we'd love to have in the outback, the trails that are up in the mountains, and how do we get to those, and how do we make them all one comprehensive system. Now, the thing that the Trail Mix had going for it was great for planning and great for bringing different organizations and municipalities together, but it didn't really have a way to implement any of that. And what you'll see later on in this discussion, we'll talk about how the North Idaho Trails Collaborative, NITSE, was formed in order to take on the non-motorized aspect of what Trail Mix laid out. All right.
So part of what we learned in this work was that there were a lot of barriers that were causing people not to spend time outside. We found that within this, there were 20% of adults who were not even participating in physical activity in our region. And so we looked at, like, what are those barriers that are happening that make people not go outside? And this could be anything from not walking downtown on a sidewalk to not venturing out to the trails that surround us on public land. And what we found were some of the typical issues were lack of infrastructure. When we looked at that in terms of our town, lack of sidewalks, bike lanes, and then the lack of trails. We had a few trails, but again, they had similar access issues, where a lot of the trails that are located in and near our town that were more accessible because they were close in proximity were very steep. And so it really limited the people that could use those trails to people who had sort of a high fitness level. Also looking at things, if you were thinking about access and going further out, was the cost. So the cost to drive around the lake and venture out on the trails on the east side of the lake, there was a cost to that. And so there was a limit of what you could do because it would potentially was an economic issue for you. Again, that health issue. We were seeing health issues prevalent in our region. 15% of our children were not participating in any physical activity. 50% of our children in the wintertime were not participating in any activity. And when you dialed down on that figure, it was really interesting. Only 30% of our children, as you well know, North Idaho, known for its snow, especially Sandpoint, only 30% of the children were getting outside to even sled. And in Bonner County, we have a huge food security issue. 1,500 of our children go hungry in Bonner County each day, and 18% of those children in Bonner County are food insecure. And so that's part of being able to go out and do this physical exercise, is making sure that these children are well fed. We also had 62% of our population being overweight and 25% of the population being obese. There was also issues regarding the lack of information. So lack of information about trails or access, or how you get from point A to point B safely, was creating both fear in people, fear of going out onto a trail, fear of, you know, there's always the fear of the wild animals, a lack of confidence because they didn't quite know how to go about it. Maybe they had never been out on a trail. Maybe they typically got in their car to go places rather than getting on a bicycle. And then also just procrastination. There's a link that Jason's going to put in the chat, and that is the city of Sandpoint did a youth needs assessment. And that youth needs assessment really helped us look at, like, what are these barriers to getting people outside? And these are things that each of these organizations that are on here, POP, Sandpoint Nordic Club, and Kaniksu Land Trust was looking at really intently. I can speak for Kaniksu Land Trust in saying that, you know, one of our main missional goals is getting people outside. Once we get people outside and they begin to love it, then they'll begin to protect it. But then again, for POP and SNC, getting people outside, getting people active and participating in these sports is an important part of that health factor in our community. So we had an opportunity, and that opportunity that came up is a project called Pine Street Woods. This is a project that really began surfacing out of work that our whole community was doing, thinking about breaking down those barriers and how do we support our community? How do we accomplish and tackle some of these things like these access issues and economic issues? And how do we just give people a place to go and experience trails that are at a level at which they can, that anybody of any ability can experience them? Pine Street Woods is 160 acres that Kaniksu Land Trust began a capital campaign for in 2017 in order to purchase 160 acres that was 2 miles from the heart of Sandpoint. So you see Sandpoint here on the slide, very close, and here's the meadow at Pine Street Woods. So this $2.1 million capital campaign, which took about 2 years to fundraise for, it was really led by being able to go out to different organizations, different businesses, corporations, foundations, and of course, at the very end, our individual people within our community saying, help us break down these barriers, help us get people outside. And as well, for Kaniksu Land Trust, purchasing this land was also a huge conservation. There was huge conservation value in it. It's not, we all know how Idaho is growing. We can all see the United Van Lines survey that says we are the state where everybody is moving into. We knew that capturing 160 acres close into the heart of Sandpoint and to the heart of our community was what we needed to do now for that growth that was to come. And so the conservation values were beautiful here. It allowed our population a close-in place to play where it was an amazingly diverse property with forests, meadows, and pocket wetlands. And as well, then it connected to our vision, our mission, which we have, knowing about Kaniksu Land Trust, we have a great educational program. Of course, we focus on conservation with private landowners, but also this very important recreation element. And this recreation element gave us the ability to really pull in our beautiful partners, POP and SNC, to say, how can we do this together? Because we are a small staff. Kaniksu Land Trust is a staff of 5, and there is no way we could take on 160 acres, opening it to the public without this help and support of these 2 organizations to make it happen. And so we knew that if we wanted to do this and we wanted to open it to the public, which was only 2 years ago, that we would need to involve, we would need that support of these two organizations.
Yeah, so my background with Pine Street Woods goes back a few years ago, quite a few years ago, when Kaniksu Land Trust was first looking at this property. And I remember going on a walk one day with at that time, the executive director of Kaniksu Land Trust. And he had this vision that we would have trails that were more socially oriented trails, trails that didn't necessarily have people going like a string of mules down a trail when they're riding a bike or running or walking. And so to have some trails that had some width to them so that people could walk shoulder to shoulder. And so that was kind of a turning point for us. So when Kaniksu Land Trust was able to raise the money to buy the property, they asked if I would be willing to lead a Trails and Recreation Committee for KLT, specifically in regards to Pine Street Woods. And we put a committee together that had people, of course, I represented the Nordic skiing community, but we also had people from the Pend Oreille Pedalers, from Idaho Trails Association, the conservation angle from KLT, and others that gave us support as we went through this. And one of the things that I think transformed our way of thinking of trails, and this is going to sound awfully trite, but we just said, you know what, we need wide trails and we need narrow trails, and they benefit different user groups. So our wide trails were trails that we would use for social walking, if you will, people that want to walk together with their family and they don't want to be, again, in single file, people that wanted to maybe have their dogs come along. And in the wintertime, those wide trails could also be trails that we could use for cross-country skiing. And then narrow trails for the typical things that we do on narrow trails, like hiking and running and biking and so on. But then we started thinking, well, what else could we do to make these trails more amenable to both of these groups? So we started developing specifications. And one of the specifications that we did, for instance, is to how can you make a narrow trail that is equally fun and exciting and usable for a walker or runner as it is for a biker. And some of those specifications I think have really benefited, because we have bikers that absolutely love these trails at Pine Street Woods, and when we have hikers that love them as well, and the same with the ski trails in the wintertime. So those are some of the things we learned. In addition to that, we said, how can we make this property accessible to all? So we feel like this is kind of an entry property, so that it's close to town, as Katie showed in the previous picture. The trails are designed for the beginner to intermediate user, so not a lot of crazy, jumps and bumps and things in our trails at all. And so how can we make a series of trails that in the typical trail utilization are things like green and blue designated trails, so that we could introduce people to the outdoors in a way that they would build confidence and then go out from there. One of the things we did as well is we said, there aren't a lot of trails in our community that are ADA accessible. So one of the things we did is we did build, it's a gravel trail, but fine crushed gravel, compacted gravel trail that we got funding from AARP. And in fact, this trail on the right here that says wide trail, that trail in the summertime is actually a wheelchair accessible trail. So the trail system, we've had, it's actually won some awards in the way that it's been designed and how the collaboration works. I think Jason may have just put a link to that in the chat room as well. So really been an interesting collaboration. It's been so fun for me to work on these trails as a Nordic person, but it's been so fun to work with people like Jason and his team in building these trails and making sure that they complement one another throughout the entire trail system. So who was taking this slide? Let's see.
I think you're going to start, Ross, and then I'll talk a little bit about what
right.
POP does.
Yeah, so we do use these trails and Pine Street Woods in general. So one of the things we were able to do, by the way, was Nordic Club was be able to raise money last year to build a facility. So we do have a facility that we house all of our cross-country skis and snowshoes that we rent out to the public and we use for our youth programs. And one of the things we do there to promote education is we do run our youth ski league program, which is an after-school program out of Pine Street Woods. And then what we did last year, which was really it's just a wonderful thing that we were able to raise money for, is doing in-school group programs. So we have school groups come up. This year with COVID, we can only do it once a day, but we have them come up Tuesday, Wednesdays, and Thursdays, and teachers just have to sign up. We have a website that we make available to them. And when we provided that, so we did that for 8 weeks. So we had 24 sessions. When we provided that to our local schools, public and private, we had those 24 sessions subscribed in about 24 hours. And so we plan to try to double that next year and have 2 sessions a day, assuming kids are back in school more full time. So that's just an example of how we're able to reach out to the youth in the community, as well as do some education through the school programs that we do there.
And when I started as the ED of Pend Oreille Pedalers, one of my goals for that first year was to start some youth programming in the mountain bike realm as well, to kind of emulate what the Nordic Club had been doing for a few years with skiers. So thanks to Pine Street Woods, which within the first year, we had about 3 miles of very beginner friendly kind of green trails available, narrow trails. We had a place and a venue to actually host youth mountain biking camps, which we started last summer, 2 weeks. We had 48 local youth between ages 7 and 12 come out with 3 coaches. And this year we're expanding our youth programs. In fact, just today I sent a newsletter announcing the first ever after school mountain biking clinics, which will start and run for 6 weeks in May and June this year. We've also recruited some new coaches, and now we're going to be able to expand our summer camp options as well. I've been getting emails from people as far away as California and Arizona asking about our youth summer camps. There's huge demand for it. And in the meantime, Kaniksu Land Trust, Pend Oreille Pedalers, and some other partners are also building more trails. So as we get more trails into this network that are these sort of beginner-friendly narrow trails, we're going to be able to continue offering more and more opportunities for area youth to get out and learn some of the skills that they'll hopefully take with them into their adulthood as well. So Pine Street Woods, Kaniksu Land Trust, and then POP with the inspiration from Nordic Club are for the first time starting to offer youth programming as well in the community.
And one of the big things, one of the big reasons that Pine Street Woods was really interesting to Kaniksu Land Trust was we have a really beautiful youth program that looks at, that works with the in-school education. And as well, we have another summer camp series that goes for 6 weeks and invites in 150 children from our community to spend a week outside in nature. And so having a place to do that was very critical for the success of these programs and the way that these programs are really oriented. This year alone, we had 1,760 days spent with children, and part of our program, in order to tackle that food security issue, is we always provide food. And so along with the 1,760 kids that participated, we did 1,760 meals. But we could not do this work without our partners, because our partners and the work that they do to make these trails, build them and maintain them, is essential to making Pine Street Woods what it is and being able to offer all of these beautiful youth programs that we have for our community. Kaniksu Land Trust is ever grateful to POP and SNC. Last year alone in 2020, 770 partner hours spent working on these trails, which is just amazing.
And just a point to add to that, that's the amount of hours that we estimated for building trails. It doesn't include the amount of hours for putting on the programs.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, a lot of tons of volunteer hours to put on the programs.
Absolutely, absolutely. Julie, you want to introduce a little bit about the whole system?
Sure. So first of all of this has happened in the last 2 years. It's amazing. And first, Pine Street Woods is shown up here in the first box, and that is 160 acres. Ellie Kraus gave us, donated this 20 acres. He lives in Florida, and he has memories of living or visiting his grandparents on this piece of property. This property here is Sherwood Forest, probably is the kind of the original trails that were here and built by Pend Oreille Pedalers. This property is in a conservation easement. And it's my sister actually owns this property, and I cried for years every time I'd run on it because it was such a gift, or ride. And so moving forward, I had the opportunity to purchase this property next door to expand on this wave that's happening here. I'm super grateful to be part of this whole thing. I'm in collaboration with Pend Oreille Pedalers to put more trail on VTT. And you can see here, that's the circle. But these are the trails that exist in this very close in 1 mile from downtown, from either town, from the city of Dover to this and the city of Sandpoint. It's right in the middle. It is a piece of property that will forever be for the community and very close to town. It is just this timing is to take this project up is a gift and could not have been done without the amazing efforts of all of these people. I started getting involved with all of this with Equinox Foundation, and now when with NITSE formed, I can't be they can't shake me from the organization and the getting together and making this happen.
All right, so now I'm gonna kind of tie us back a little bit to where we came from and how we're going to go forward, and then Jason will talk a little bit about some of our big projects going forward. So we have been contemplating this issue of this North Idaho Trails organization since, I think, formally since about 2014, and we've been kicking that around. And then I mentioned earlier in this discussion that we had formed this group called Trail Mix, and Trail Mix was this broad-based organization. But Trail Mix really didn't have a way to implement things. And then all of a sudden Pine Street Woods came about, and we thought, wow, if there is a time for us to have a non-motorized collaborative, now would be the time. And so simultaneous with developing Pine Street Woods and the experiment that became, we formalized North Idaho Trails Collaborative. And those are the people you're really talking with on the Zoom call today. And so what we wanted to be able to do is make sure that we had a strong voice for trails. And so that when we were approaching the city or the county or federal land owners or corporate timberlands, when we were going to them, it wasn't just a bike group or just a ski group or just a conservation group, that it was, we were representing people way beyond ourselves, not just, avid bikers and skiers and runners. No, we were representing every single person in this community that lives in North Idaho because of what recreational opportunities it has to offer, and making sure that they had a voice, all of them had a voice as we go forward. So that's what the North Idaho Trails Collaborative is about. And then Jason, next slide, will be talking a little bit about kind of a big project that we have in front of us now.
Yeah, so one of the words that Ross likes to use when talking about Pine Street Woods and how what NITSE has done at Pine Street Woods is that it has provided sort of a petri dish for the kind of work that we think we can do on a larger scale for the community in North Idaho and Sandpoint specifically. So let me just introduce this picture before I move on to the next slide with some more information. This is taken, you can actually see a trail over here in the lower left-hand corner. That's a trail that Pend Oreille Pedalers built a few years ago called the High Point Trail. This is actually on Schweitzer Mountain Resort property, but everything you see to the right in this picture, almost all of that property is owned by the city of Sandpoint. It's 5,000 acres that the city has accumulated over about 100 years. And flowing through the middle of that basin is the city's watershed. It's actually Little Sand Creek, which the city gets about 40% of its drinking water from. And you can see Sandpoint and Lake Pend Oreille down below the watershed here. And that's kind of what we have our eye on in the next few years. Is if we could go to the, well, actually we'll come back to the watershed in just a minute. In addition to what we've done in Pine Street Woods and this vision for kind of replicating that on a grander scale in the watershed, NITSE is also getting involved with city planning efforts here in Sandpoint. So we are currently in the midst of revising our 10-year comprehensive plan, which the city is required by law to revisit every 10 years. And part of that is a multimodal master plan. So some of the language you see here on the screen, which I won't read to you, is pulled out from the city's draft multimodal master plan. And you'll notice lots of pedestrian and bicycle language in the master plan, including a map here on the left showing some of the proposed bike and pedestrian pathways and connectivity throughout the city of Sandpoint. So as the advocates for cyclists and non-motorized recreationalists in Sandpoint, NHTSA is very much involved. We have been at the table in the visioning and the planning and the drafting phases of this multimodal master plan and of the larger comprehensive plan, which is currently being reviewed. So a few more goals that have been articulated in the city's master planning efforts that you can see here, very much relevant to what Pend Oreille Pedalers, to what the outdoor recreation, non-motorized recreation community is all about. So we are at the table. We are constantly meeting with city staff and lobbying with city council members and our mayor to make sure that not only do we get the right language in these master plans, but that over the next 10 years, the city is committed to fulfilling these objectives or meeting these objectives. So that's kind of what we're doing on the municipal level. I think the next slide, we're going to look at the Little Sand Creek watershed in particular. So Sandpoint's super unique. Not a lot of rural communities in the American West own an area as beautiful and as expansive as Sandpoint does. I think the watershed property that the city owns is about 10 times the size of the city of Sandpoint, which is mind-boggling when you think about it. And it also happens to be accessible by a road that accesses Schweitzer Mountain Resort. So it's also very unique that you can drive into this wild area. However, at present, there are gates at every switchback on the road banning any sort of recreation in the watershed. So there are only about 5 miles of trails on city property in the watershed, which are managed by Pend Oreille Pedalers and are used almost exclusively by mountain biking. But one of the kind of prizes that NHTSA has its eye on for the next 5 to 10 years is getting involved with the protection, the conservation, and the expansion of recreational opportunities on city property. This is 3 miles from downtown Sandpoint in this vast, beautiful basin that we call the Little Sand Creek watershed. We understand that the priorities are always going to be, if we go back one slide, Katie, are always going to be about protection of water quality. And back one more, please, Katie. And the conservation of the resources. But we also understand that if we can get trails in there, specifically wide and narrow trails year round for cross-country skiing, for mountain biking, for hiking, for huckleberry pickers, that it's going to provide opportunities for enhanced quality of life and possibly boost the tourist and amenity-based economy of Sandpoint as well. So we're kind of, that's one of the angles we're taking is spreading this message that trails are about more than just, as Ross said, the hardcore mountain bikers or the trail runners or the cross-country skiers. It's for the whole community. We can go to the next slide, Katie.
Hey, Jason, can I just interject one thing that's interesting here and really unique to this particular watershed? As Jason said, the watershed is a large inholding of the city of Sandpoint. It happens to be largely adjacent to one of the largest privately owned alpine areas in the West. As most of you know, most alpine areas are on National Forest Service land. And Schweitzer Mountain properties, I'm not sure, Jason, where they have like 7,000 acres or something like that, that is that's adjacent right to the watershed. So we have the opportunity to integrate with Schweitzer Mountain and their year-round recreation plans that they have as well, to combine these two properties into a really massive area for trail-based recreation.
Yeah, we couldn't be more lucky. Schweitzer is actually the largest ski resort in the state of Idaho, and one of their executives is a board member of Pend Oreille Pedalers, and we have a very good relationship with them and are super excited to continue working with them and integrating our public trail network, which already ties into the private resort trails of Schweitzer Mountain. So we have plans in the works. We are at the table with the city as they work on their recreation master plan for the watershed. It also requires partnerships with the National Forest Service and the BLM, which own land in the basin as well. And we hope to see in the next 5 years the emergence of a recreation master plan that articulates a role for NHTSA, for the Nordic Club, for Pend Oreille Pedalers to help to help build and maintain trails on city property in the watershed. So we can go on, Katie. All right. I think Katie's going to wrap it up.
So we just wanted to thank you all for listening to what's going on up north in Idaho and the awesome collaboration that's happening in order to help support getting more people outside. We put the link to all three of the organizations here that are represented in the North Idaho Trails Collaborative. And we would welcome, for the last, I think we have a few minutes, any questions that you might have.
And does anybody have any question for our group? I have to say that I was really excited to hear this group talk, and obviously you guys put yourselves in this place and you're the right people for the job. I mean, this is way more impressive than I thought. So what an amazing team you are and what amazing stuff that you've accomplished. So does anybody have any questions for our presenters?
And Cynthia, we also included that we put a video in the link to our presentation, but we've also included that link as well. And it's a great video that highlights again the work that we all did together at Pine Street Woods and why it was important to collaborate and in order to make that project a success. And so like we often say with the petri, that shows the petri dish of what's going to happen hopefully for us going forward as we create this larger, we think about Pine Street Woods as this sort of the spoke of the wheel, and as we create trails that go outward from there and really connecting not only our community but all of these small rural communities that surround us, getting everybody out recreating, be it bicycle, walking, hiking, trail running, or Nordic skiing. So it's really exciting, and we're just at the we just feel like we're at the curve of the hockey stick.
I'm going to go ahead and ask you all a question then. So I don't know how long this has been going on, a couple of years, maybe 2 years or something. So looking back on it, do you all think that this partnership proved to be more valuable than what you initially thought when you got started on this?
I'll speak just as the member from Kaniksu Land Trust. Yes, I think that when we started Pine Street Woods and the work on Pine Street Woods, I really think that we didn't quite anticipate how powerful we would all be together in terms of not only being able to go out and build this infrastructure, but also in terms of how it would actually bring so many members of our community together when we all work together, and then really activate, I think, that cross membership and have our community feeling like they're supporting something much bigger than just each individual entity. And so, yes, I would say that. I would love for Ross and Jason and Julie to speak as well, if they'd like to.
Yeah, I'd happy to chime in. You know, being part of the Pine Street Woods Trails and Recreation Committee, and also being one of the, especially not this past summer, the summer before, I was almost full-time up there doing trail work and got to talk with just a ton of people. And I mean, the gratitude in the community is just amazing. And the proof might be in the numbers. And I don't know, Katie, you can recite the numbers. I don't know them off the top of my head, but like our biggest issue right now, and this is really a good thing. Our biggest issue right now is we have too many users at Pine Street Woods. And it gives us, it's like this big promotional piece for us, because it gives us a lot of energy to go and do more things like Pine Street Woods, as Jason just referred to. So what are some of the trail numbers that we're getting?
Yeah,
our user numbers?
Yeah, our user numbers. So in 2020, we anticipate we had from trail camera data that we've taken 20,000 people have, 20,000 individual users have come up and used Pine Street Woods. So,
and our county population, by the way, is 43,000 people. So,
yeah.
Yeah, and I'd like to just chime in that the requirement of what we put on ourselves as NITSE to put aside our individual hats and think collaboratively and share ideas and support. I think we've created a really powerful movement to affect our community, both with the individual projects that we get to work through, Pine Street Woods, the Lower Basin, and some future projects that we're hoping to work through, but also which I want to just say, we have the dream of putting together higher elevation cross-country ski trails so that we can have snow.
Yeah, especially after this winter. Oof.
Yeah,
Yes.
but just the thinking, the way we're thinking about it, I think is really really effective and a powerful thing. And I want to say thank you for this opportunity and what's happening here, because I think we're kind of a microcosm of the sharing. As we share, you're sharing with all of these us and groups and getting us all familiar with each other. So thanks for the opportunity to do this. It's really cool.
I would just say this is kind of a general observation. Maybe this is my naivety because I lived overseas for half of my adult life, but I used to think that when a city said they were going to do something, they were probably going to do it. But one thing I've learned in the 4 years I've lived back in Sandpoint is that this city of Sandpoint always says that they're going to do amazing things, but then it takes the citizens of Sandpoint to hold them to that and to actually drive the effort forward. And I'm just really kind of excited to find myself in that position where I'm one of the people who is kind of holding the city's feet to the fire, and the county as well, and the state and the federal government. We're all accountable as citizens. We all have to hold the governments under which we live accountable as citizens. And that's kind of what one of the things NHTSA's doing is working with and steering the city and the county's efforts to expand recreation and trails, but then also carrying it out once it's down. Like, that's kind of up to us as well. We're lucky to live in a place where the city officials, elected officials, and city staff are in support of this, but really the resources are extremely limited as far as actually making it happen. So that's where we're trying to fill that gap in the community.